Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We're out on the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. The hashtag is Crab Cake Tour. I'm wearing my Chicken Palooza shirt. I want to say that I had the best Chicken Palooza chicken box I've ever had. I crossed the bridge. We were going to Ocean Odyssey at Cambridge, but I was hungry. And I got two-piece white, got Western fries, ketchup, and roll, and my wife's driving on 50. We're getting down by Denton and 404. I picked this up at the ROFO behind the 5301 outlets in Queenstown. The Queenstown ROFO, best ROFO chicken I've ever had, and it's true. And I did gas up too. And I don't want to tell you what I paid because gas is too much, but everybody knows that. So my friends at ROFO putting us out on the road. You got 2 more weeks for Chicken Palooza. Make sure you're jumping in there and doing that. Luke Jones is here. He jumped in and did the fake football thing on Saturday night, and now on the backside of fake football, and who's the quarterback, and who's on the offensive line, and how are we going to run the ball, and who's going to catch the ball. But another game this week, and I guess they're going to try to sandwich what used to be week 2 and week 3 into now what is week 2.5, and Lamar hasn't walked on the field yet, and the preseason's half over, more than half over if you think the third game is the fourth game, which was trash. Luke, times will tell, but I would say this, amidst the offensive line, and I don't want to say chaos, but lack of clarity at this point, right? The nebulous nature of position issues, injury issues, depth, wherever there's some soft tissue on the roster. Practices, getting on a plane, going out in the heat, playing a game this week. John would probably tell you this is the most important week of preseason, right?
Easily. I mean, I think even acknowledging some guys that won't be back just yet, but just the evaluation opportunity. I mean, this is really a supersized week when you consider, okay, you're going to Carolina, you're going to play the Panthers on Saturday night. Great. Preseason game 2, I would assume we'll see Lamar Jackson. We'll see a few more veterans who were held out, which wasn't surprising as far as Saturday against New Orleans. But these joint practices, we've talked about this a lot in recent years, how these coaches love having the opportunity to compete against unfamiliar players, someone in another jersey, which, you always hear them talk about that during training camp. Guys are tired of hitting each other. So that's why they do like the preseason games. But you get an opportunity here to have a controlled environment where you can evaluate against another team. I mean, we saw it, some instances, and I even saw some reporters around the league, at different games where I think there was a team that kicked a field goal at the 4-yard line or something like that. And a reporter was just saying, what are you getting out of that? Well, you get a 4th and goal opportunity from the 4 and you're kicking a field goal there. Well, I guess maybe they wanted to give their field goal team a rep, but there's a situation.
Maybe they want to win 18 games in a row in the preseason.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe that, but you have those certain game scenarios that for whatever reason, they won't manifest in the preseason. You won't get that 4th and a certain amount of yardage where you want to try this certain package or this certain menu of plays, and that just doesn't come together. Well, joint practices, if you and the opposing head coach are on the same page and as far as what you want to get out of this, you can plan it out. Yeah, we're going to do a period where we work on third down inside the red zone. We're going to have a period where we're going to work on a lot of our outside the numbers passing game, 12 personnel. I mean, you go down the list. Whatever both coaches wants to try to accomplish, you now have this forum where you can practice against another team. So you're not having these guys that at this point, I mean, Marcus Peters knows what makes every single Ravens wide receiver tick at this point, right? He's gone up against them now for 2.5 weeks. And some guys longer than that as far as some of the veterans. But go up against Carolina, you're not as familiar with all those guys, and you're not as familiar with their offense or what they do defensively. So these coaches love it, but it just gives them that controlled environment as opposed to a game where, everything that goes on with games, TV timeouts and all of that, not
Harbaugh
knowing.
even had to give a little pep talk on a sideline the other night, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they love that. So you're going to have that evaluation for a 2-day period down in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and then you'll play a game on Saturday night, which, we'll see how that looks after those 2 days. But, I think based on how their joint practices have gone in the past. I feel like the only one that they weren't thrilled about was Chip Kelly and the Eagles years back, where if you recall, Chip Kelly actually ended up game planning against them for the preseason game, and they got steamrolled. And I know John was not happy about that, and it's actually why they shelved joint practices for a short time after that. But
well, you know what I saw the other day? I saw the replay, and I don't even remember this play, but the Redskins played the Ravens, and there was like a really chippy play, and everybody got in a fist fight. Do you remember this in a preseason game?
That was remember Jay Gruden and Harbaugh got after it.
Harbaugh came across the field, was going to kill Jay. Then he was going to kill Brent Harris. Was that the same game?
I don't know if that was the same game.
Maybe not. I don't know. But John was
not
really, really ripe. And so there's that too of whatever that was, that chippiness. That sort of weird stuff happens during these practices where
it can.
By the time they go to play on Saturday night, they don't like each other at all.
There can be some of that from time to time. In fact, I wasn't there, but remember when they practiced in Indianapolis a few years back, there ended up being a pretty big, I wouldn't say it was a full-scale brawl, but there were punches thrown between a couple players. So there was some of that. But it's a competitive environment, but it's a controlled environment. And I think that's what the coaches really like here, because they can practice very specific things they want to practice that, with the clock and penalties and different things that happen over the course of a 60-minute ball game that you're not going to get a chance to practice. I mean, we've seen the Ravens run trick plays on special teams in the preseason. I don't really understand the purpose of that, but they've done it. So, but the point is, you want to practice certain things, you want to see certain things, you want to see certain plays, certain personnel packages, whatever it might be. And these joint practices provide a great environment for that. But they can go thud. They can go 3/4 speed for something specific, whatever it might be, that you're not going to have that in the live game setting. So, they'll still play the game, and, we'll see what that looks like. But this is a big week in those terms. I think evaluation wise, for young guys who have played well early in camp, who took it to the game and played well in the game, now it's like, okay, now you're going to practice against the Carolina Panthers for 2 straight days. And those are guys that you're not going to be as familiar with as practicing against your own teammates. And you're not going to be as familiar with what they do offensively or defensively. Let's see you do it in this environment. So I think for the young guys that are kind of pushing for that roster spot, I think this is a huge week for them, because we've talked about this, whether that third preseason game feels like the third or feels like the fourth, where it's kind of the throwaway and just the young guys playing. We know by that point in time, most of the roster moves and decisions have pretty much been made. So this is probably the last best chance for some of these bubble guys to really make a great impression over the course of this week.
All right, so where are we with bubble guys and special teams? And let's just assume Zeitler's fine. Let's just assume Ronnie Stanley's fine. We've gone doomsday in the other circumstances. Where is the depth chart defensively? And I would think that at some point in the next week to 10 days, you're going to be sending out WNST text, courtesy of Coons Baltimore Ford, with names that we remember from the third weekend of April, because I think we're at that point with the depth of this roster and the people they're bringing in. You still seem to think they're going to bring in a guy we still haven't heard of to play tackle as a backup or a swing tackle, because you don't think they have an answer, and they might not have an answer. Give me some names and some guys we're going to need to watch here this week.
Well, I mean, we've talked a lot about the offensive line. I think, their top 7's pretty decided. I mean, we know they're projected starting 5. If we're talking putting Ben Cleveland in that group, we know Tyree Phillips will be, the number 6 or number 7 guy, Patrick McCary being the other. So you kind of have those 7, and you figure most years they keep 9. So Ben Powers, who did not play well on Saturday night. It was ugly. He struggled at left guard and right tackle, which they've kind of been trying with him, I think, to see if he can be a versatile game day option. Like Patrick McCary can play all 5 spots. He doesn't play all 5 of them particularly well, but he at least plays a couple of them well. And in a pinch, you get 2 injuries on game day, you usually only have 2 linemen that are up as reserves. So
yeah, well, I've seen games where tight ends are playing guard.
Exactly.
That's what happens.
So that's why a guy like McCary, who is not a starter, He's his best role is a backup, but if he can play all 5 spots and play 2 or 3 of them pretty well, as a fill-in, and then the other 2 he can be functional, let's say, then hey, he's going to be on the team. But you look at Tristan Colon, you look at Ben Bredesen, Ben Powers. Is there a room for one of those veterans I mentioned, Michael Schofield or Andre Smith? That what I saw on Saturday night and what I've seen in practice, I'm not sure they're going to hold on to a veteran guy that isn't playing at a particularly high level as a backup. So you have
depending on how they feel about Stanley too.
Well, sure, and again, that so much of that is going to hinge on what does he look like. On similar lines, Nick Boyle, coming back and hasn't been practicing yet. Had the cleanup procedure in June. That third tight end spot, I think it's Josh Oliver, who they got from Jacksonville for the late round pick. A former third round pick who was hurt for the Jaguars for his first couple seasons. However, if Nick Boyle isn't ready to go week 1, does that open the door for Eric Tomlinson, who, remember, was their blocking tight end that they added down the stretch last year? So some moving parts there. Wide receiver, it's so tough for me to figure that out right now when, we know Bateman's going to be out. At least I would think, I think it'd be a miracle if he's ready for week 1. So if he's out the first couple weeks, do you put him on IR? Remember, the IR rule is just like last year, 3 weeks, 3-game minimum now as opposed to 8. So it does change the math a little bit on trying to project these injuries and how that impacts the roster. So, but Prochet, I think he's safe as the number 6 wide receiver at this point, even though he might be the number 3 wide receiver based on their injuries right now. But Miles Boykin, he's been out since the first week with a hamstring injury. He was kind of on the bubble anyway. Is his time up, or do they stash him on IR because they don't want to cut a 3rd-round pick from a couple years ago? But I think what's really interesting, though, a lot of what I just mentioned are some attrition situations, trying to find a couple guys that you feel are good enough. I think on the defensive side of the ball, it's really interesting when you get into the secondary. We've talked about this, and we know you can never have enough corners, right? And even last year, they had times where Anthony Levine was the nickel late in the second Cleveland game because they had a bunch of injuries. But when you look at their top guys, Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, Tavon Young, if he's healthy, and that's a big if, but he's healthy right now, and we know he can play when he's healthy. Jimmy Smith, who is banged up with the ankle right now, but should be ready to go for the start of the season based on what we've been told. But then you go down the list, Anthony Averett, who has played at a high level at times over his first few years. I think he's a quality backup, but in the final year of his rookie contract, where does that factor into this equation? Chris Westry, taunting penalty aside on Saturday night, has been one of the big surprises of camp. He's 6'4". He makes plays on the ball constantly. He's got swagger to his detriment at times, as we saw on Saturday, but he's the kind of guy, that outside corner depth that you love to have, that, let's face it, Jimmy Smith, this is probably it for him. It was close to being it for him last year before, he had a conversation with Eric DaCosta and basically said, hey, come back for another year. And he's like, all right. But you'd like having that outside corner depth, but you just drafted Shaun Wade in the 5th round. I've just named we're talking about 6, 7, 8 corners here. I mean, you can't keep 8 corners on your roster. So what does that look like? I haven't even mentioned Devontae Harris, who was one of their best special teams players late last year, but is technically a corner. So you have that. You have safety where I think Brandon Stevens, the 3rd-round pick, really impressive on Saturday night. They played him at nickel. They played him at corner. He blitzed. He looked pretty solid in coverage. Couple hiccups on a couple zone coverages where he didn't react quickly enough, but Wink Martindale likes him, and I think he's someone that you could see involved in their dime package as a 3rd safety, and maybe they move Chuck Clark or Deshaun Elliott into the box on occasion. So, kind of what they did 2 years ago. If you remember, Brandon Carr played safety late in the year when they went to 3 safeties. It was he and Earl Thomas back deep, and they had Chuck Clark playing in the box. So,
well, they always feel like they can coach up that kind of athleticism.
Yeah. So but now I'm Geno Stone, who had 2 picks on Saturday night, he's on the bubble. Ardarius Washington, the rookie free agent, who I think is kind of the one undrafted rookie who has a chance. He made a couple plays, put his helmet right on the ball for a forced fumble. Anthony Levine's in the mix there. Jordan Richards is in the mix there. Those guys are core special teams players, but do they give you enough positional value now? So, Nestor, I wasn't counting with my fingers, but too many defensive backs, right? Too many secondary members there that I just reeled off. They're going to have some decisions. And I guarantee you, unless they have a couple injuries, and look, there's still a few weeks to go here, so there could be injuries, but there's a very good chance, let's say, if not a guarantee, that they're going to be cutting a couple guys that are absolutely NFL caliber defensive backs that they'd like to hold on to, and they're just not going to have room for. So I think that's where things are really interesting. And then outside linebacker.
Well, also from a trade perspective and horse trading, because Eric doesn't give away assets.
Yeah.
So but Kerry Vedveg, I know you made a Kerry Vedveg joke out on social media.
Yeah, Jake Verity, the toast of the town now after hitting a 53-yard field goal, I think it was. So, but I think outside linebacker, the top five I think are set. You have Houston, you have Bowser, Pernell McPhee. You would assume is safe. He was held out on Saturday night. They love his ability to set the edge, even if he's a little long in the tooth at this point. And of course, the two rookies they drafted, who Owe and Hayes both flashed. I mean, Hayes had a really nice dip move coming off the edge for a quarterback hit. Probably could have been a sack. It looked like the quarterback's knee was down. But what does that mean for Jalen Ferguson, who, by the way, I thought he played a heck of a football game on Saturday night. He played like a guy who recognized, I'm not on scholarship anymore. So now he has to keep that going, and the numbers are the numbers, but there's another potential, as you just alluded to, maybe you move Jalen Ferguson to go get that piece you need elsewhere on the offensive line, let's say, or, you package him and a day 3 pick for, I don't know, a starting caliber left guard. If you're not, if Ben Cleveland has missed too much time and you're worried there, I'm just throwing out a theoretical there, but hypothetical, but there are some definite decisions to be made. And notice, I really mentioned it being on the defensive side of the ball. Their secondary is so deep at this point with interesting young players that, I'm not saying they're going to be stars, but guys that have looked good enough to say, I'd like to have him as a backup, because we know corners get hurt and safeties get hurt, and the
Ravens have been good at hiding guys over the years.
Sure.
Just being creative, and however they're not going to let anybody go for nothing that they really value.
Right, no question about it. And I haven't mentioned the defensive line. I don't think the numbers are quite as problematic there, but we've talked about this a lot. That defensive line's old. Brandon Williams, Calais Campbell, Derek Wolfe, and Justin Ellis, all 30 or older. So, Ellis, I think, he's not a lock just because of, when you're a backup nose tackle that's 30 years old, and you have an Aaron Crawford who played pretty darn well on Saturday night. You have Broderick Washington that's still in the mix there. We know Justin Madubuike at this point, they think he's going to be a starter for them. If not this year, he's going to play starter snaps at least, and he'll be a starter for them moving forward after that. That's how high they are on him. But you want to see a couple young guys there emerge, and that's why it was good to see the defensive line play the way it did on Saturday night, because they held out the veterans, which made sense. You don't need to see Calais Campbell in the preseason for more than maybe for him to get a couple series at some point here over the next couple weeks. But you saw those young guys play extensively, and you want a little more youth there, because we saw this last year when Campbell and Brandon Williams had some health concerns. What that meant for their run defense, it wasn't good. So good to see some of those young guys. So I just said it, we went through every level of the defense, and didn't mention inside linebacker quite as much. I think that's pretty set. Maybe Christian Welch as a special teams guy as a 5th inside linebacker, but every level of that defense, there are decisions to be made. And I think they are good decisions in the sense that you're not just trying to pick out the best of the rest, where you're just like, okay, well, we need another guy at this spot. Which one is the best out of these guys that we're not really excited about? I don't think it's the case for their defense. I think they like these guys, and I think they like a lot of these young guys a lot. So they're going to have some tough decisions to make, but that's why I kind of, going back to, as much as we kind of mock this 18-game preseason winning streak and how weird it is and how it doesn't really mean anything to the big picture. But I think you go back and look, I think over those 18 games, they've given up 20 points once over those 18 games. What does that tell you? pretty good defensive depth that has really shown up in the second, third, fourth quarter where they're just overwhelming other teams. And it's a credit to Eric DaCosta and the scouts and the coaching staff for identifying these guys and developing them. Even if they don't stick in Baltimore, they're at least showing some ability to play. And again, who cares about a preseason win? But it's nice to talk about having a lot of options at those positions, which the Ravens seem to have on the defensive side right now.
Luke Jones will be in Owings Mills, but not Spartanburg, although my mother was from Abbeville, South Carolina. They have a lovely peach in Gaffney, South Carolina. The Gaffney Peach that oversits Greenville and Spartanburg down in South Carolina. I only saw Springsteen down there a couple years ago, but my day will come. Pearl Jam will play there before it's all over. You can find Luke Baltimore Luke and obviously all things Ravens as we get up on the second game. I'm out on the road doing the Crab Cake Tour. The hashtag is Crab Cake Tour. You'll hear from Michael Steele and lots of folks here this week as I continue to pick up crab cakes and head to Ocean City. Luke, I'm going to stop our Ravens part of the conversation now and just give you a little bit of oxygen because you spent far more time with the baseball team than you should. I'm mean like that as a cruel boss. The Chris Davis era has come to an end. Wow, right? Like, yeah. When's the last time he was a major league player? Like, I'm being really honest with you, where he stood
that
in
he
the
actually
box.
Played
2017, 18.
Well, I mean, he's played. I mean, he's played. He's
no, I mean, like, been a major league player for 3 weeks in a row and hit 241, like something that would make him a major league player. Been a while.